Carrying on from my previous video about putting together a practice routine, which if you missed, you can find by clicking the pop-up just now. Today we're going to be looking at the different music and guitar practice essentials in greater detail. We'll look at each essential, discuss what it is that I need to improve on, what it is that I can work on for that particular unit, and find a couple of interesting exercises that we can use as a base to move forward. And also for each exercise and video that I mention, I'll put a link in the description below so that you guys can check it out and use it however you wish. But before we get into that, what I first want to start with is looking at my goals in music, my immediate goals, so that I know that what I'm practicing and what I'm working on is helping me work towards those goals, which right now is me passing my grade 8 guitar exam for electric guitar. And I'll keep this very brief, but the criteria for the exam is as follows. There'll be a performance piece, which will be very jazz fusion focused. The technical exercises will focus on higher level scales, arpeggios, chords. There'll be some improvisation, ear training, and sight reading passages, and a few questions on general musicianship and theory. So just looking at that, I already know that I have to work on everything there, quite a bit. But I'm also not just going to jump into these things specifically straight away. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start from the very beginning. I'm going to focus on the basics just so I can build things up and have the confidence in my foundation and move on to the higher concepts when I'm ready. And I'll also be keeping track of everything that I work on in a practice journal, which I found a lot of people recommending simply because it's a good way for you to stay on top of your practice routine. You can keep track of the areas where you're improving, the areas where you might need to spend a little bit more time. If you're working with a metronome, you're keeping track of your starting speeds and your max speeds. It basically just allows you to be more on top of everything and streamlined, just so you know that nothing's being left by the wayside. For a bit of a refresher, on screen now are the 8 practice essentials that I put together in my previous video. And what I'm going to be doing is working on a random 4 of these every day for 15 minutes each. And first in that list is exercises. And for me, exercises refers to strength and speed improvements, right and left hand dexterity, and picking accuracy and discipline. Firstly, I'm going to be using chromatic spider patterns and hammer off and pull offs to work on my speed and my strength. Paul Davids actually had quite an interesting suggestion for practicing spiders and chromatics. So instead of the normal spider, or any one of the variations, he recommends playing it like this, and then only moving one finger at a time to the next string while keeping the previous fingers where they were on the previous string. So now for me, my fingers tend to jump around quite a lot when I'm playing. So I quite like this because I feel like if I practice this enough times and I work with a metronome and I work with increasing tempo, it will sort of force me to get used to keeping my fingers closer to the fretboard and will hopefully allow me to be a little bit more in control of my playing, especially for faster passages, legato playing in future, or things like that. I found some great string skipping exercises from Fret Jam for right and left hand work. And I'm also going to try changing from alternate picking to economy picking for picking discipline and accuracy. And all of this I'll be doing with a metronome, starting from a bass speed and working my way up to my max speed before ramping back down. And I'll be changing between single notes, double notes, triplets, and sixteenths, as well as keeping track of everything in my journal. So moving on to techniques, which for me refers to sort of different tools that you use in your playing for expression, such as double stops, which I love, but I rarely use them because I've never really looked into them specifically, but it's something that I'd really love to start using in my own playing. Bends, which I definitely know I need to be more accurate with, especially with knowing what it is that I'm bending up or bending to. Sorry, bending from or bending to, because at the moment I'm just guessing. As well as fingerstyle and finger picking, which I want to work on for the sake of dexterity and just kind of building up skill and versatility. And finally, hybrid picking, which is for versatility as well, especially for live performances where you have to swap between playing with the pick, maybe finger picking a few sections. It just sort of streamlines things and makes things easier. And my favorite hybrid picking pattern that I use also as a warm-up is the introduction of the Alter Bridge song Cry of Achilles. So for each of these, I've just found a couple of different exercises, some tabs that I'll use to practice as a base to kind of build up the foundations with each of them. And then with playing over backing tracks or jam tracks or anything like that, I'll start working on finding ways to incorporate them into my own playing. Now for scales, I'm doing the same thing, just starting with the basics, the pentatonic, the major minor scales, basic modes, all of the positions and inversions of these scales. But I'm also going to work in looking at the melodic minor and the harmonic minor, as with my lessons and with my playing at the moment, I'm just finding that I need these scales, and it's definitely something that I also need to work on. And to practice these, I'm just going to stick to what works for me at the moment, which is that I just chuck on a very static jam track and then just play the scale over the jam track, trying out different positions and inversions and everything like that. And for this, I recommend the Quist jam. I've probably butchered that. Kist. As I found his backing tracks work best for this. Arpeggios are something that I've never really looked into specifically. So I'm also just going to start very basic with them, just working on 3 and 4 note arpeggios for major minor, susses, 7th chords, and then eventually working my way up to more advanced things like augmented, diminished, and all of that good stuff. And I'm also just going to pick a random key every day and work on the arpeggios that are in that key. To then start applying this to my own playing, I'm just going to find another backing track, one that has very distinct chord changes this time, and then I'm going to play the relevant arpeggio over the relevant chord as it changes. And for this, I found that the best jam tracks come from the Elevated Jam Tracks channel, which they show the chord changes, they show the scales that you can use, and they're just very helpful, and their jam tracks are great. Chords may be the one thing on this list that I'm actually relatively confident with, I think. Playing different inversions, different positions and whatnot. But the one thing that I definitely know I need to work on is extensions. So to practice chords at the moment, what I do is I pull up a jazz score, I pull up a jazz track, and I comp the chords over the track, trying to play the chords in as many different positions as I know, as well as learning new ones and trying to play them as well. And for this, I use the Realbook app, which I believe is called iReal or iRealbook. And I can't recommend that highly enough, because this allows you to play over jazz progressions, play over jazz tracks, and it also shows you different chord charts as well as different positions for chords, voicings, everything. It's great. But a new technique that I'm also going to try incorporating is adding extensions to chords that aren't actually there, that aren't written in, as a way to add your own sort of flair and your own style to it. This was an exercise that was recommended to me by my teacher as a way to develop your rhythm playing, as well as sort of fill out your understanding of extensions and how to use them. Now, theory. And This is a big one for me because for a long time I felt as though I've had these very, very big gaps in my theory and in my knowledge, which have been holding me back. So my goal here with practicing is to change that and to move forward and not feel like that anymore. So I have this simple, very, very simple theory book, which I'm going to work through. I'll go through the content in the book, find a couple of exams online. There are numerous ones of these. There are numerous things online which you guys can find literally anywhere, and just work my way up through there, filling out my knowledge. And I'm also currently looking into organizing theory lessons, because I tend to do better with face-to-face, especially for something like theory. For ear training, I've just found a very simple app. It's called Perfect Ear. Use it to identify intervals, chords, scales, anything like that, just through very simple exercises. There's numerous ones of these, countless ones of these, anywhere you look, so you can find the one that works for you. But something that I've passed a lot of musicians talking about is the value of transposing something by ear. So sitting with a song or a solo or anything like that that you like, and figuring it out without looking at any music, without looking at any tabs or anything like that. This is apparently one of the best ways that you can train your ear, to the point where samurai guitarists called it musical superfood. So it's definitely something worth looking into. And finally, for something that I know next to nothing about, sight reading. And for this, I am literally just starting from the absolute basics. I've ordered a modern method for guitar, the first volume. So I'm just waiting for that to arrive, and when that arrives, I'll just start working through that. But to bring everything to its conclusion, those are the essentials that I'm going to be focusing on in my daily practice routine. I feel like these essentials cover all of the bases. I feel like these are going to help me work towards my goal of passing my grade 8 as soon as possible, as well as just rounding out and developing my general musicianship and abilities. All of which I am going to speak about in a video in future to do with goal setting, improvement, and timelines, and all of that good stuff. There are, of course, other things that I'd like to work into my practice routine, such as chord melody, sweep picking, legato playing, but I know that I am nowhere near ready to tackle these things. And I know that what I need to focus on now is just building my base, being very consistent and very methodical with just strengthening my foundations before moving on to more advanced concepts. But that about does it. As always, guys, I hope that there was something useful in this video for you. I hope that there's something here that you can take, you can work into your own practice routine, using your own playing. That is, after all, the goal of everything here. As I learn, so do you. We learn together, we grow together. So if you have found a way to use any of this in your own playing, in your own routine, please let me know, because I would really, really love to hear about it. I have also finally made my Patreon account. It needs a little bit more work to get it off the ground, but I will keep you guys updated as I have very big plans for that side of things. But yeah, I guess just thanks for sticking around, and I'll see you guys in the next one.